The winds of the Mongolian steppe howled across the empty plains as a lone rider approached the imperial camp under the cover of night. The guard let him through. No one dared stop a messenger carrying the Khan's private seal. Inside Genghis Khan's great royal tent, a fire crackled as the conqueror of half the known world sat in silence, staring into the flames. He had crushed kingdoms, humbled empires, and built the largest land empire in history. But tonight, his heart was heavier than any war campaign he had ever fought, because Genghis Khan was guarding a secret, one that, if revealed, could tear his empire apart. This was not a secret about conquest or betrayal on the battlefield. It was far more dangerous, a matter of the heart. The great Khan, feared by millions, was in love. And not just with anyone, with someone he could never publicly claim. Whispers had already begun in the camp. Advisors muttered behind closed doors. If the truth came out, rival tribes could use it as a weapon. His generals might question his judgment. His sons might see him as weak. But Genghis Khan could not let her go. She was said to be unlike any other woman of the steppes. Bold, intelligent, and fearless. She was not merely a companion, but a confidant, someone who challenged him, who made him think beyond conquest and bloodshed. Yet there was one problem. She belonged to a rival clan, a clan Genghis had defeated, sparing only a handful of survivors. Taking her as his consort would mean risking rebellion, reopening old tribal wounds, and shattering the fragile alliances that held his empire together. As the fire flickered, Genghis Khan clenched his fists. Tomorrow, the Council of Warlords would meet. They were expecting him to discuss the next military campaign. But Genghis was thinking of something else, a choice between love and empire. Would he follow his heart and risk civil war, or bury his feelings to preserve his legacy? This was the hidden story behind the man history remembers as an unstoppable conqueror, the human side of Genghis Khan, caught between passion and power. Her name was Borte Khatun. To most of the world, she was just another noblewoman from a conquered tribe. But to Temujin, the man who would become Genghis Khan, she was everything. Borte had been promised to Temujin since they were children. In Mongol tradition, marriages were often arranged early to strengthen alliances between clans. But when Temujin's father was poisoned and his family abandoned by their allies, the engagement should have been broken. Yet Borte waited. Years later, when Temujin fought his way back to power, he rode to her family's camp not as a beggar but as a rising warlord. He asked for Borte's hand again, this time not as a powerless orphan, but as a man reclaiming his destiny. But fate was cruel. Shortly after their marriage, Borte was kidnapped by the Merkit tribe, one of Temujin's bitter enemies. They took her away in the night, a deliberate insult meant to humiliate him. For many men, this would have been the end of the story, a sign of dishonor, a reason to abandon her. Temujin did the opposite. He gathered an army of 20,000 men, joining forces with his ally Togrul and his blood brother Jamukha. Together, they launched a full-scale assault on the Merkit tribe. Temujin fought like a man possessed, cutting down anyone who stood in his way, until Borte was freed. When she returned to him, she was pregnant. The child, Joki, was born months later. And here lay the seed of Genghis Khan's greatest inner conflict. Some of Temujin's sons and generals whispered that Joki was not truly his, that he was the son of Borte's captors. But Temujin silenced them. He raised Joki as his firstborn, treating him no differently from his other sons. Still, the doubt never fully went away. And this was the heart of Genghis Khan's forbidden love story. Because Temujin did not just love Borte. He loved her with such intensity that he defied Mongol tradition, political risk, and even the judgment of his own bloodline to protect her and their child. Historians often focus on Genghis Khan's ruthless conquests, his massacres, and his empire-building genius. But few speak of the man who waged war for love, who turned personal heartbreak into one of the most important campaigns of his early life. This love shaped him. It taught him that loyalty could be stronger than blood, that bonds forged by choice could be more powerful than those dictated by birth. But it also gave his enemies a weapon, a whisper campaign that would follow him to his death. The world might know Genghis Khan as the man who united the Mongols, But Borte was the reason he never forgot what it meant to fight for something more than power. The night Borte was taken was burned into Temujin's memory. The Merkit raiders stormed his camp under the cover of darkness, dragging her away as she screamed his name. Temujin stood helpless, clutching his sword, watching the woman he loved disappear into the night. He didn't sleep that night. He didn't eat the next day. His men whispered that their Khan had gone mad, but they followed him when he swore an oath before the eternal sky. I will bring her back, or I will die with her name on my lips. Temujin knew he couldn't do this alone. The Merkit tribe was strong, and if he attacked recklessly, he would lose not just Borte but everything he had built. So he called for allies. He rode to Togrul, the powerful Khan of the Karite, and begged for aid. He went to Jamukha, his sworn blood brother, who commanded a fearsome force of warriors. Together, they raised an army of 20,000 men, the largest Temujin had ever commanded. The campaign began at dawn. Temujin's army swept across the plains like a storm. The sound of hooves shook the earth. Arrows darkened the sky. The Merkit camp was taken by surprise as Temujin's riders circled them in the traditional Mongol encirclement, a deadly tactic that allowed no one to escape. The battle was brutal. Steel clashed against steel. The screams of warriors mixed with the cries of panicked horses. Temujin fought at the front, his bow in hand, his sword flashing in the sunlight. To his men, he was not just their Khan. He was a man possessed by destiny. When the dust settled, the Merkit lay defeated. Temujin stormed their tents until he found Borte. She was alive, bruised, terrified, but alive. The moment they reunited is one of the most emotional scenes in Mongol history. Temujin dismounted his horse, dropped his weapons, and knelt before her. Witnesses said he took her hands and pressed his forehead against hers, whispering words only she could hear. But victory came at a cost. Borte was pregnant, and no one could say with certainty who the father was. This was a dangerous truth in a world where bloodlines meant everything. Temujin made a choice that would define his future. He would claim Borte's child as his own. When Joki was born months later, Temujin named him his first son, his heir. Many of his generals protested. Some of his other sons would later accuse Joki of being illegitimate, a claim that would nearly tear the empire apart after Temujin's death. But on that day, Temujin did not care about politics, power, or lineage. He cared only that Borte was safe, that the woman he had risked everything for was back by his side. And from that moment, his enemies learned a dangerous lesson. If you touched what Temujin loved, you would bring the wrath of a future world conqueror upon your head. When Borte finally gave birth, the entire camp held its breath. This was not just the birth of a child. This was the birth of a possible heir to a man who was quickly becoming the most powerful leader on the steppe. The baby boy was healthy and strong, with eyes that reminded Borte of Temujin. She named him Joki, meaning guest, a subtle acknowledgement of the strange and turbulent circumstances of his conception. But the whispers began immediately. Around the fires, Temujin's men murmured in hushed voices. "How can we be sure this boy is truly the Khan's blood?" one asked. Another replied, "He is born too soon. Perhaps he belongs to the Merkits." Temujin heard every whisper, and each one cut deeper than any sword. This was the price of his decision to take Borte back, the price of his love. His rivals now had a weapon not made of steel but of rumor. Temujin made a bold and dangerous choice. He gathered his generals and advisors and held Joki up before them all. "This is my son," Temujin declared. "He is my firstborn, my heir. Any man who doubts it doubts me, and I will treat such doubt as treason." His words silenced the camp, but they did not erase the unease. Even within his own family, cracks began to form. His other sons, Chagatai and Ogidi, grew up hearing the whispers. Chagatai, fierce and proud, would one day openly challenge Joki's right to inherit, saying, "How can a man who may not even be of our blood rule after father?" This tension would haunt the family for decades, eventually boiling over into near civil war after Genghis Khan's death. For now, though, Joki grew up under the shadow of doubt, trying to prove himself worthy. He became a skilled warrior, a brilliant commander, and one of Temujin's most loyal sons. But no matter how many battles he won, there was always someone ready to remind him of the night his mother had been taken. Borte suffered in silence. Though Temujin never doubted her, she carried the pain of that night for the rest of her life. Her love for Temujin was unwavering, but she knew the price she had paid, a price that would shape the destiny of their entire bloodline. Temujin, too, wrestled with his choice. He had built his empire on loyalty and trust, yet here was a wound that could never fully heal. And in the quiet of night, as he lay awake beside Borte, he wondered if his love had made him vulnerable. If this single decision might one day undo everything he had fought for. If there was ever a chance for Joki to silence the whispers about his birth, it came on the battlefield. By the time he was a young man, Temujin had transformed from an ambitious warlord into Genghis Khan, the great Khan of all Mongols. His empire stretched across the steppe, swallowing tribe after tribe into his banner. But holding that empire together required not just conquest but trust. And so Genghis sent Joki to prove himself. The campaign was against the powerful Khwarezmian fortress cities, a brutal series of sieges that would test even the most seasoned generals. Genghis entrusted Joki with a crucial mission: capture a key city and open the path for the Mongol horde. Joki accepted without hesitation. He rode at the head of his army, his banner flying high, determined to prove that he was not just the son of Borte. He was the son of Genghis Khan. The siege was brutal. The defenders fought fiercely, hurling burning oil and stones from the walls. But Joki was relentless. He studied the city's defenses for days, looking for a weakness. Finally, he saw his chance. Under the cover of night, Joki led a small team of warriors through a hidden river channel that ran under the city walls. They crept through waist-deep water, emerged inside the fortress, and opened the gates from within. At dawn, the Mongol army stormed in. By nightfall, the city had fallen. Joki rode back to camp triumphant, his armor stained with dust and blood. He dismounted before his father and knelt, presenting the captured city's banner. Genghis Khan looked down at his son for a long moment. The camp was silent, waiting to see what he would say. Then, slowly, the great Khan smiled. "You have done what few men could," Genghis said. "You are my son, in blood, in spirit, and in honor." For a moment, the shadow of doubt lifted. The men who had once whispered about Joki's birth now cheered his name. But not everyone was convinced. Chagatai, Joki's younger brother, still refused to acknowledge him as rightful heir. The rivalry between them would grow sharper, threatening to tear the family apart even as their empire expanded. For Joki, though, this victory was everything. He had proven himself on the battlefield. He had earned his father's respect. And most importantly, he had taken one step closer to silencing the ghosts of the past. But as the Mongol Empire grew, so did the pressure on Genghis Khan to name an heir. And the question that haunted him remained: would his love for Borte cost him the unity of his empire? Behind every empire builder stands someone who shapes their decisions. And for Genghis Khan, that person was Borte. She was no ordinary wife. Borte had stood by Temujin since before he became Genghis Khan. She had endured kidnapping, humiliation, and whispers about her son's legitimacy, and survived. Those experiences forged her into a woman who understood not just love, but power. When Genghis returned victorious from his campaigns, he often found Borte waiting with counsel that no general dared to give. "Temujin," she would say quietly in their yurt, "you are not just a conqueror, you are a father, a leader. The future of our children depends on the choices you make now." Borte's greatest concern was Joki. She knew the other sons, especially Chagatai, resented him. And she knew that if Genghis named anyone other than Joki as his heir, it would confirm the whispers that Joki was illegitimate, a stain that would follow her forever. So Borte worked carefully, playing the game of Mongol politics with skill that rivaled any warlord. She reminded Genghis of the night he rescued her from her captors, of the bond they had shared since childhood. She argued that the strength of the empire came from keeping the family united, and that naming Joki as heir would send a message that loyalty and blood were stronger than gossip. But her influence went beyond her son. Borte often persuaded Genghis to temper his rage and show mercy when he might have unleashed destruction. She argued for alliances instead of total annihilation, for marriages instead of massacres. And surprisingly, Genghis listened. Many historians believe that Borte was the reason Genghis built such a stable empire rather than leaving behind a wasteland of burned villages. Her voice became the quiet conscience of the great Khan, and, at times, his greatest political advisor. Yet her power made enemies. Other wives, concubines, and even generals resented her influence. Some whispered that Borte was manipulating the Khan, that she was dangerous, that she placed her family's interests above the empire's. This put Genghis in a terrible position. He loved Borte deeply, but he also had to keep the loyalty of his generals and his sons. The decision about succession loomed like a storm cloud over the camp. Borte knew that if she failed to secure Joki's position, all her sacrifices would be for nothing. And so, as the empire expanded and the conquests continued, Borte played a delicate game, protecting her son's claim, keeping the peace between the brothers, and ensuring that Genghis' love for her never turned into doubt. But as every strategist knows, love and politics rarely mix without blood being spilled. Even as the Mongol Empire grew, the greatest threat to its survival was not outside its borders. It was within the Khan's own family. Joki had proven himself a capable general, but Chagatai refused to let go of the rumors surrounding his brother's birth. Where Joki was calm, calculated, and diplomatic, Chagatai was fiery, blunt, and unafraid to speak the unspeakable. "He is not truly one of us," Chagatai said openly during council meetings. "How can a man lead the empire if no one can say whose son he truly is?" Each word was a dagger to Joki's pride and to Borte's heart. The rivalry was not just personal. It became political. The Mongol generals began to take sides. Some favored Joki for his cool-headed leadership and battlefield victories. Others backed Chagatai, who they saw as a more traditional, uncompromising warrior, one whose loyalty to the bloodline could never be questioned. Their father tried to keep peace between them, but the tension was impossible to ignore. One night, after a particularly heated argument, Chagatai went too far. "You are no son of the Khan," he spat at Joki in front of the entire council. "You are the son of a Merkit dog. You shame us all." The yurt fell silent. Joki's hand went to his sword, his face pale with rage. For a moment, it seemed the brothers would kill each other where they stood. But Genghis Khan rose, his voice like thunder. "Enough!" he roared. "You will not dishonor this family with your feuds." He separated his sons, but the damage was done. The council was divided, and so was the future of the empire. From that day, Joki and Chagatai rarely spoke. When they did, it was with the clipped tones of enemies forced to share a tent. Even on campaign, their rivalry boiled over. In one campaign, Joki accused Chagatai of disobeying orders and costing them time. Chagatai, in turn, accused Joki of plotting to seize power before their father had even died. Their feud became so bitter that Genghis was forced to consider a third option, passing over both Joki and Chagatai and naming his third son, Ogidi, as heir instead. For Borte, this was the nightmare she had feared all along. If Joki was denied the succession, it would confirm every whisper that had haunted her since the day she returned from captivity. And for Joki, the insult cut deeper than any wound. He had spent his entire life proving himself, and still it was not enough. By now, Genghis Khan ruled the largest land empire the world had ever seen. From the steppes of Mongolia to the edges of Persia, his name inspired terror and awe. But for all his conquests, one decision haunted him more than any battle ever had: who would inherit the empire after him. He gathered his council in a massive yurt, the air thick with the smell of horse sweat, leather, and tension. Joki sat quietly, his face calm but his eyes burning with unspoken anger. Chagatai glared at him from across the room, jaw clenched. Ogidi and Talyui, the younger brothers, exchanged uneasy glances, sensing the storm about to break. The generals and advisors waited. Everyone knew why they had been summoned. Genghis Khan rose to speak, his voice carrying the weight of the entire steppe. "I have united the tribes," he said. "I have brought peace to a land torn apart by blood feuds. But if I do not choose a successor, all that I have built will crumble into dust the moment I am gone." His gaze shifted to Joki. For a moment, the room was silent except for the crackle of the fire. Borte watched closely, her heart pounding. This was the moment she had fought for, the moment she had risked everything to secure for her son. But then Genghis turned to Chagatai. Chagatai's eyes lit up, certain that the Khan was about to name him heir. Instead, Genghis Khan said something that shocked everyone. "Joki is my firstborn, and he has proven himself in battle," Genghis declared. "But the unity of this empire must come before all else. Joki and Chagatai cannot rule together. Therefore, I name Ogdi my heir." The words hit the council like a thunderclap. Joki's face turned to stone. Chagatai sat back, stunned. Borte's hands clenched in her lap until her nails drew blood. It was the ultimate compromise and the ultimate betrayal. By passing over both Joki and Chagatai, Genghis had chosen stability over love, politics over blood. He had ended the feud by removing both rivals from the throne. But in doing so, he had shattered Joki's heart. That night, Joki left the camp without a word. Some said he rode out to hunt. Others whispered he went to gather allies of his own. But one thing was clear: the choice of Ogdi as heir had set in motion events that would shape the empire's future long after Genghis Khan was gone. And for Borte, it was the cruelest twist of fate. She had won many battles, but in the end, she had lost the war that mattered most. After Genghis Khan's shocking decision, Joki was never the same. He stopped attending council meetings. He no longer laughed around the campfires with his brothers. Even Borte, who had always been able to reach him, found her son distant, lost in thoughts he would not share. Joki threw himself into hunting and solitary rides across the steppe, as if trying to escape the weight of the world. The once proud warrior who had stormed fortresses now looked more like a man haunted by ghosts. Ghosts of betrayal, ghosts of doubt, ghosts of a destiny denied. Some said he plotted rebellion. Others said he merely wanted to live in peace, far from the shadow of his father. Whatever the truth, tension between Joki and Genghis reached a breaking point. One fateful night, Genghis sent word to his eldest son, "Return to camp and face him." But Joki refused. "I will not come," he said, his voice like cold iron. "I have done all that was asked of me, yet I am still not enough. Let Ogdi inherit. I want no part of this empire." Those words were the last he ever spoke to his father. Not long after, Joki's health began to fail. Some claimed he was poisoned by rivals who feared he would one day rise against Ogdi. Others believed it was grief that killed him. Grief for a life spent proving himself, only to die still carrying the burden of doubt. When news of his death reached Genghis Khan, the great Khan did not speak for a long time. Then, those who were present say they saw tears in his eyes, a rare and dangerous thing for a man like him. "He was my son," Genghis said at last, his voice breaking. "Whatever the world may have said, he was my son." Borte wept quietly in her tent. She had lost not only her firstborn, but the dream she had carried since the day of her rescue, the dream of seeing Joki take the throne. Even Chagatai, who had fought his brother all his life, was said to have mourned in silence. Perhaps he realized too late that their rivalry had destroyed more than it had ever built. Joki's descendants would go on to rule vast territories, founding dynasties of their own. But for the Mongol Empire, his death marked the end of an era, the moment when love, politics, and family tore apart the heart of the man who had united the steppe. Long after Joki's death, the Mongol Empire continued to grow, stretching from the Pacific Ocean to the gates of Europe. Genghis Khan's dream of uniting the tribes had been fulfilled, but the cost of that dream was written not just in blood spilled on the battlefield, but in the tears shed in the Khan's own tent. Borte never stopped honoring her son. She kept Joki's banner near her yurt, a constant reminder of the boy she had risked everything to protect. To the end of her days, she defended his memory, insisting that he was the rightful heir in spirit, if not in title. And in a way, history vindicated her. Joki's descendants, known as the Golden Horde, became one of the most powerful branches of the Mongol Empire. They ruled vast territories across Russia and Central Asia for centuries, spreading the legacy of Genghis Khan far beyond the steppes. Even though Joki had been denied the throne, his bloodline carved out a kingdom of its own, proving that he had not fought in vain. Historians now see Borte as more than just Genghis Khan's beloved queen. She was the quiet architect of an empire, the woman who kept the Khan focused on building something that would last beyond conquest. Without her influence, Genghis might have been remembered as just another warlord. Instead, he became a founder of a dynasty that changed the world. As for Genghis himself, those closest to him said that Joki's death left a wound that never fully healed. He had built an empire by breaking others, but losing his firstborn son reminded him that some losses could not be conquered. In the end, the story of Borte and Joki is not just about scandal or politics or war. It is about love. A love so fierce it survived betrayal, whispers, and even death. It is about a mother who fought for her child's place in history, and a son who spent his life proving that he deserved it. Their story reminds us that even the mightiest rulers were not just conquerors. They were parents, lovers, and humans, with hearts that could break like anyone else's. And maybe, just maybe, that is why their tale still resonates today.